Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. My name is Julie Hirsch. I'm the co-founder of Element's Natural Vitamin Teas, and I'm so privileged to be here with you today facilitating this incredible panel on the circular economy. Now, as you've just heard, circular economy can sometimes be more of an aspirational term rather than a realistic term. We know that we simply can't recycle our way out of the waste crisis that we're in. But is it possible to create a system that stops waste before it starts? I'm so pleased to hear from this expert panel who's going to bring their diverse experiences from technology to academia to actually implementing this on the ground today. And I hope you'll join me in applauding this panel, and they will introduce themselves shortly. Professor Navid, I would love to start with you, please. From your perspective as a researcher, when we say circularity, what do we mean?
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that. And thank you very much for inviting me to this panel discussion. Look, so previously, the business was always a linear in most cases. So we wanted to get a product at the end, and we worked towards getting this product. The circularity means that if there is any waste comes through this, we recycle the waste, we reuse the waste. Not just for the purpose of recycling, but that would also add benefit to the economy of and the industry. The reality is, for instance, in the agriculture industry, you get the animals to produce a lot of waste. And if we are not somehow recycling this waste and we're not reusing this waste, we're going to have an issue, which is that the nitrogen and phosphorus from these waste would find their ways into our waterways, which then cause huge issues with, in our waterways. Look, for instance, we've got plenty of people here from Western Australia, and as you know, in Perth, we love Swan River and Canning and Swan estuaries. And as you notice, every now and again, we had to shut down the river because of the harmful algal bloom. All of these happens because we are not capturing these NNP very effectively. So the circular economy is now, how can we use these resources to produce benefit to the industry, if it makes sense?
Thank you for that, Professor. Edwina, I'd love to go to you next. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us from your perspective of implementing this on the ground? Do you agree with that definition? Does it mean something else to you?
Thanks, Julia. I'm the pig farmer on the panel. Maybe there are a couple of other pig farmers here, so I might not be the only one in the room. Maybe better than me saying what my definition is I could tell you a little bit about what we do on our farm, which gives some examples of circularity in practice. So we have about 20,000 pigs on hand any day of the week. We sell about 40,000 pigs in a year. We feed those pigs all sorts of food waste products, quite a lot, so 13,500 tonnes most years. That's roughly 650 semi-trailers. So if you lined them up outside the convention centre, it would certainly make a pile. Some of those food waste products include bread that has not fresh enough to be sold in the supermarket, pasta, flour, a lot of dairy product that's gone past its use-by date, juice. We use fish fillet waste. A lot of it comes out of food processing, so in there, where they're adding value or creating a product, whatever the waste is there that is sent to us. So our pigs eat that and turn it into fabulous Australian pork. We also grow some of our own grain. We use the pigs' manure as fertiliser on the paddocks, and then the grain comes back towards the pigs. Another example of something going around. But we don't stop there. So the pigs' manure is captured in our effluent system. We capture the methane gas that comes off the pig's manure, and we use that to make electricity, which is renewable electricity. Most of that is used on our farm. We do export a little bit back into the grid. So not only are the pigs using their manure to grow the grain, but also to power the own site. Then the generator creates a lot of heat, so we have a heat exchanger that heats up water, and we use the hot water to heat our little pigs. So hopefully in that is maybe my definition. We don't use the word circularity on our farm very often. We're probably too deep in trying to solve the problems that we've got in front of us.
I'd love to ask a follow-up question. Taking the word circularity out, how do you describe this quite complex and incredible system that you've implemented?
Well, I really think it's us just trying to make the use of what we've got. So an opportunity comes along and we go, how do we make that work? And we keep working at it till we get there.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Huia, I'd love to go to you next. I'm going to read out your title because it's such a cool title. Sustainability Business Group Leader and Technical Director of Circular Economy at GHD. Now, you've been in this industry for 20 years. Can you give an introduction of yourself and also tell us what are the biggest misconceptions that you've seen around waste and circularity?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Yeah, cool title, lots of big words there. Fundamentally, what I do, I work for a business called GHD. We are a global consulting firm, and we help our clients to, I guess, in the circular economy context, to really find the value in their businesses, to find those opportunities. And I guess just going off Edwina's fantastic, real-time implementation answer, it sounds like what you're doing is finding the value for you in keeping those valuable materials circulating in your farm system. And that's really a great way to think about the circular economy. When we think about circularity, I like to explain it in relationship to our linear economy. So our linear economy is currently the economic paradigm that we're living within. And it was designed at a time in our history for a really good reason. We were coming off the back of a whole range of world wars. We needed to get a huge number of people back into the workforce, and we needed to really crank up the economic machine. Now, our linear economic system has done that fantastically well. It was designed for that purpose, and it's achieved that. Now what we're facing is a different set of global circumstances with our climate catastrophes. We've heard about our food waste catastrophe. The list goes on. We are now hitting the limits. So what we actually need to be doing is redesigning our economic system to really hold the value that we need to continue to remain prosperous. So the circular economy fundamentally is about decoupling our own prosperity from the continual extraction of virgin materials. And a lot of my clients will say to me, well, but what else do we do? Like, we actually rely on these virgin materials to keep our business, our global systems functioning. And the answer is, we need to look to the value that we have in those products and materials that are already in our system. I mean, if you think about how illogical it is to pump a huge amount of resources, energy, water, staff, time, capex, all the things that go into creating a single product, which, we use for a certain period of time, short or slightly longer, and then it ends up in landfill. So that illogical system where the value is pouring out, leaking out at all parts of our supply chain needs to be fundamentally rethought.
Thank you so much for that. Antony, last but certainly not least, partner at First 30 Ventures. Now, we've heard this morning about AI and how it's coming. We've also heard how machine learning can be used in the agri-food supply chain. Can you provide us a perspective around the technology that we might see coming, and also give an introduction of who you are?
Yeah, thanks very much. The First 30 actually references the first 30 centimeters of the soil. We believe it to be the most undervalued asset on the planet. And so kind of centered to that thesis is to regenerate soils. We need to basically break this linear economy. I think the equation that we kind of live off, you can probably find it in like the Living Planet report, and WWF talk about it. It's in many, many reports, but you may have heard of Earth Overshoot Day, where effectively we are extracting almost two times the amount of resources our planet can actually regenerate or recycle our waste effectively. And so we need to work out a way of clearly maybe it's not essentially reducing, but being a lot more efficient with the materials that we pull off the planet. But circular economy talks about essentially no waste, but then also regenerating nature. But we look at it like we may not be able to kind of get to zero waste, but if we can focus on targeting regenerating nature, then we are clearly working within the bounds of the planet's capacity. So we look at this very holistically and very systematically. So we believe fundamentally that data and the intelligence on nature, understanding it and its value, is missing still. As much as we all know it's important, but it's then we're trying to invest into technologies, companies that are showing the value of nature. Now, nature's big and it's lots of components, and I can dig into some of those areas, but understanding the soil, understanding biodiversity and how that's changing. And if we start to link that to economic outcomes, yield, for example, or floods and disasters, etc., then you can maybe start to shift these businesses and change the economic business model to kind of incentivize nature's regeneration. But in terms of technologies, again, we look at multitude of companies, but there is companies down the supply chain which I've been working with. One of them is like an ambient IoT business, which is putting tags. These essentially they're kind of like a postage stamp sticker, to best describe it, with a computer inside. Costs like 10 cents, and it charges itself with the energy that's around us. Pretty amazing stuff. But the exciting thing there, what I've seen from that technology as an infrastructure to power, for example, AI, but it gives the visibility within the supply chain. And I think we had it in the previous speaker, but it's just giving visibility of where things are in the supply chain. And I've found that is probably one step to understanding, to kind of process waste and see where things are. It's giving the visibility is probably one of the greatest ways to kind of start to enable the circular economy. So yeah, investing in visibility and data and intelligence is the number one priority right now.
Fantastic. And to follow up on that, I imagine you would see quite a lot of new technologies, new ways of doing things coming through. I'd actually open this up to the entire panel. Who is doing this well in Australia or globally? Who can we look to and take inspiration from? Besides, of course, Edwina.
Okay, I'll jump in. Who's doing this well? I should be able to answer this kind of quickly, shouldn't I? It's pretty bearish, isn't it? I can't answer this kind of question quickly. I think finally we might be seeing, we're at a tipping point where I'm kind of painting the picture that I think the future's bright, and the fact of, I think consumers have been wanting this for a while. We all know that. People want to live on a healthy planet. And they've kind of asked you, I think we've seen financial institutions starting to move that way, and I'm talking about, for example, ESG funds, sustainability funds. They haven't come out of nowhere. They've come out of consumer demand. And they're starting to force companies to look at their supply chains. And now finally, I think we're getting governments catch up on regulation, and they're now starting to. So we've kind of got this triple threat happening, and I think this is the now moment, and now things like AI kind of accelerate these things. So I wouldn't say one area is doing, I wouldn't put a finger on it, but I think within the EU, obviously I'm from the UK, but in the EU there's some great regulation happening there, which is forcing this in terms of visibility within the supply chain. But I think in the food will be a big winner here, but obviously I think fashion and clothing and material could be a very exciting space for where we might see the circular economy enable fastest.
I would agree with, I would concur with Anthony. I think we're seeing some really interesting developments coming out of the EU, certainly very top-down around regulation, investment. What I'm often asked is, is the circular economy just another word for sustainability, environmental protection, any number of words that you can string together? And my answer is quite wholeheartedly, no. This one is not going away. This collection of words is something that we are seeing develop really radically, and there's actually a step change that I probably haven't seen develop so quickly in the past 20 years in this industry, We know what we're seeing from Europe and, China, for example. China have had, circular economy, eco-efficiency legislation in place for decades. The EU, are rolling out a range of legislation and regulation. We are seeing whole countries transition their economic systems to be based around the principles of circularity. We now have a ministerial advisory task force under Tanya Plibersek in our own country at the federal level. She is looking at how we will transition our own national and obviously in collaboration state economies to be based around the principles of circularity. I mean, in terms of examples, I work with a whole range of different clients in different spaces. To give you a handful of, short examples, I've worked with a group of regional councils here in Western Australia to actually fundamentally review their economic development strategy and to design it around the principles of circular economy. And we helped them as a landfill organisation have a look at what their future looked financially based on a landfill course of action and what their future might look like following circular economy opportunities. They have now got full commitment from all of their the mayors of their member councils, and they have now transitioned their business model to work around the principles of circularity. I am a founding member of an organisation called CEWA, Circular Economy WA, with a number of other members. We're in our third year of operation now, and we have close to 1,000 members. We hear a whole variety of examples from them every day, from new packaging opportunities, food and beverage space, fabric and textiles is a particular part of the group that we are growing at the moment. But we're also talking to engineers who are looking to front-end load the design and planning for incorporating the principles of circularity into the work that we do. So across all sectors, you can really see people starting to step out, think about what those opportunities might be, and quite critically look at who their collaboration partners need to be, because we can't do it all alone. We have to work together.
Absolutely. And I think it's exactly right what you said, that this is not about sustainability. It's not waste reduction. It's actually finding value in things that we currently consider as waste. And I think that is incredible, but also that's a huge commitment. And Edwina, I'd love to ask you, you're in a profession that is already pretty flat out. And this is a massive investment of time and of resources. What do you think your motivation to make this change was?
Our motivation, I'm an accountant by trade, that is my training. We're motivated by the commercial outcome. When people ask what I like about farming, I usually say the profit and loss. It's got to be profitable. We have 40 fabulous staff. Their families depend on us. If we're not making a profit and we can't pay their wages, there's not much point. It is really nice as well. I'm really proud of what we've achieved. I'm really proud that we're diverting all this food waste out of landfill. And recently our industry did some benchmarking on our Life's LCA, our carbon footprint, and we were the lowest pig farm in the country in that program. I'm really proud of those things, but they don't help me pay my staff. So it's got to come back to being profitable as well.
Absolutely. So it's commercial as well as impactful, but that commercial is actually front of mind for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Professor Navid, you have some experience in implementing this with Murdoch University, I believe. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, of course. So look, going back to what Edwina said, and I think regulations are extremely important, and we need to have regulations in place for making sure we're not generating waste. But what I noticed is that when the industry recognized that they can benefit from the process of circularity, this is when they actually invest in it. Apart from regulation, we have had industries that they are very engaged in the process of circularity. Look, as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest issue that we have, this excess of nitrogen and phosphorus, which is being wasted. So now I am in discussion with a city in Perth to potentially convert the food waste through the process of anaerobic digestion, and which is then followed by using algae to capture the nutrients from the digestate. So now this would result in producing products for the city that can be sold, and also generating the electricity that can be used in the city. The same process, we are putting that to the mining camps, because they're also generating a fair bit of waste that can be used through the same process. In reality, it's not just this. We want to be able to use our resources. We do live in the state which we have plenty of sunlight, and we also, apart from the last couple of days, which has been almost killing everybody out of the heat, but the reality is that we're also living in the state that it's very suitable to grow particular plant organisms. So now, we also have access to unlimited source of water. It's not fresh water, it's a seawater. So if we can tap into these resources, use the waste that we generate, use the seawater that we get through the Indian Ocean, we in WA can be the center of producing protein for the Southeast Asia. Not just protein as a linear economy, but also if integrating waste to this, we're also sorting a problem, which is a huge problem nationally and internationally. We would need industry to be involved with these type of things and activities, but I think we are moving towards the right path.
One of the things I find so remarkable about hearing all of you speak on this is quite often we hear the challenges around a circular economy, and it's so wonderful and refreshing to hear about the opportunities that this actually brings for us. And Antony, I'd love to go to you next. What are some of the pain points, those challenges that you see in the companies that you partner with or invest in, but also what are you seeing that is causing you excitement right now?
Sorry. I think I was very fortunate to kind of work with essentially, got to work basically very closely with Amazon, for example, and Walmart out in the US. And what I saw there was when they got the ability to see where their products were in the supply chain, they were most excited not actually about going back to the farm, which obviously is not good for what we're talking about here today, about agriculture, and as much as I want it to. But they wanted to see visibility to their customer, which is the consumer. And so this may be the way to kind of the value proposition to kind of get visibility into the supply chain. We may have to go forward to go back. and we've always been saying come up from the farm and everything else. I've been trying to help farmers tell the kind of carbon story and everything else, but again, making this pay on climate may not work today. So we've got to kind of come at it from a human angle, maybe, on health, whatever it may be. But when we gave them visibility of the product going to the consumer and showing them when they utilize, like when they open the packet with these sensors, for example, like the light bulb moment went off for them, and they're like, oh, we can now keep that consumer really close to us and ask them to reorder. So we know when they're about to finish the product, then we can reorder. So again, visibility of usage is the ultimate metric I've kind of found. So I'm really excited about companies that can generate kind of utilization metrics on their products and things. So I'd encourage kind of companies to be generating that kind of data. And maybe we see it in some of the most exciting apps in the world, supposedly, because they see how we're utilizing and clicking on our phones. But I think we're about to move to this, I'll go back to it like products become smart, food products can become smart, and there's no reason why then again the end farmer can get visibility on their end consumer on how they're utilizing the product. That's all going to be possible. So getting visibility of when it was recycled and when it was utilized I've seen as the most best business case to kind of start getting that technology in. So that was, I think it goes back to what Navid was saying. It's like finding that big kind of business case for circular economy, and I think that is maybe an area to kind of start. So again, that's super exciting. And then the other side, I would say, is visibility on, we saw in the previous talk about visibility on specification, on shape and size. But my personal aha moment was when I saw a group of growers, when I was coming into this space, optimizing for nutritional density of food. In other words, getting it really nutritious. Now, their buyer wanted it. It was a pharmaceutical buyer. But we should all be really wanting to choose the most nutritious food, right? But we don't get offered that opportunity. So if we can make that visibility possible for buyers as well as us as consumers, I think, again, we'll see a transformation of the food supply chain system, because then you will see brands, for example, retailers advertising that their food is healthy. And again, that's what normally, not I'm a scientist or anything else like that, but you will probably optimize the supply chain for healthy soils, which then we start regenerating nature. So again, I'm very optimistic on those kind of things. There's visibility of IoT and visibility of healthcare metrics within the food system.
That's fascinating. The visibility of use. I can certainly see a use case for that in my household of who ate the last of the biscuits and then put the packet back in. So if we could expand to that, that would be brilliant. Huia, outside of agriculture and food, who have you seen doing this well, and what can we learn from the other industries that are also looking at circular economy?
Yeah, look, I mean, everyone's starting to have a go, which is great. You know, and it's important to know that we won't get it perfect first time, but you know, you've got to be in the boat to I don't know, be paddling down the stream or whatever the relevant analogy is. I think for me, I have been, and this was a point touched on earlier about the ongoing current and historical relationship between mining and agriculture. So seeing a lot of circular economy opportunity and investigation, both through mineral and non-mineral waste, in the mining space, but also in the construction space. And, you know, visibility is a beautiful thing to touch on Anthony's point. And, you know, the evolution of circular economy, you know, the trajectory that we're now on because of this new you know, supercharging capacity to be able to see where things are at any given moment is unlocking so much opportunity. So, you know, talking to a mining client about their common procurement practice when they're constructing a new mine, which is a standard practice to overorder by 20% on their concrete budget to just ensure that they have what they need when they need it. They're in a remote area. There's a lot of logic around it. But when I inquired with their leadership structure about how often there had been a need to dip into that extra 20%, no one in that business over the last 25 years could ever remember a time that was needed. So that's literally a 20% overorder of concrete in the bag going straight into their on-site landfill. So they were staggered, like simply by understanding what is moving on their site, what is coming onto site, what are your inputs and outputs, and how can that be adapted and you know, and made more efficient. So yeah, definitely seeing a lot of evolution in the mining space, in the built environment space as well, and in food and retail. I'm doing some really exciting work with both Apple and McDonald's at the moment in this space, and they are they are global companies with some pretty impressive targets around where they want to get to on their sustainability journey. And they are really stepping into the space of examining their own business models, examining their own products, examining their own corporate structure and their own, you know, their distribution centres, their retail stores, exactly, you know, and their restaurants, for example. So a lot of businesses out there that are starting to see, you know, the value potential that there is in shifting towards a more circular way of thinking.
And I'd love to ask the full panel, obviously, if this was easy, we would have already done it. What do you think is the biggest challenge or thing standing in our way from getting to a zero waste economy?
Can I just start?
Please.
I think one of the challenges I see is that we haven't yet integrated a lot of the potential processes because we don't know how to do those. This is a fairly new science. While we understand a lot of, and we have a very good background in plenty of the areas, but in parts of the circular economy, we haven't done enough to know how to do them. So now, learning those, integrating these things together, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. The next thing that I'm also finding, especially in WA, is that we are a heavily mining in this state, and the return of investment in mining is just crazy. So we just need to make sure that this is also recognized by the industry, and the importance of the circular economy is also recognized. So now, these are the main challenges that I'm seeing in general.
For me, I think there are challenge. I mean, we're talking about system change here. So system change is, inherently difficult, as the understatement of this day. System change is very challenging. But I think that there are a lot of different challenges. Some are technical, some are regulatory, some are investment focused. But if there's one thing that sort of really is to really pinpoint it here, the one thing that we need to be doing is sharing a vision around these complex challenges and collaborating with potentially your natural competitor to find a solution. Often it's a tragedy of volume. We simply don't have enough of something to really process it and turn it into something useful. But what if you looked at that across a region or across a sector, for example? So collaboration, to me, if you take away one thing from me, from this panel session today, it is around collaboration and actually finding out who are your coalition of the willing, and really getting around how are we going to unpack and solve these complex issues together.
Yeah, I just want to double click or double down on that. Like, I've been in the area of regenerative agriculture for a little bit, and I actually have a problem with saying that now. And someone pointed out to me recently, and I think absolutely right. It's a regenerative food system. It's a food system. It's a systems problem, as you mentioned there, Julia. And so, we have to synergize, work together. It's about actually working with the retailer, working with the brand, the farmer. But saying regenerative agriculture puts the onus on Edwina, for example, it puts it on the farmer, and there is no capacity there for the transition to happen. So it's going to have to require this. The real competitor is those outside the supply chain of food or maybe clothing, whatever you're in. That if we're really going to create this systems change, it's going to have to require multiple people working together, network together, to kind of really go for it. Obviously, historically, in this kind of linear economy, it's all kind of almost a winner-takes-all environment a little bit. So guess what? You're going to have to go to how nature's been designing itself for the last 4 billion years. Okay, very capitalistic, but there's a lot of synergies going on in there, and there's a lot of communities working together, and we just got to take our kind of learnings from them, really, and start working with. It sounds cliche, but it really is. The answers are there in nature to kind of for us to truly live sustainably. But I will just double down on this. From what I've been shown by scientists, this planet has the capacity to hold many more humans. This is not a feed the world problem. It's true, it's not. It's a functioning of the capacity of the planet problem. We have destroyed the functioning of the planet, and we're destroying it and taking it away right now. So it's not about, if anyone says we've got to feed the world, it's no, we've got to fix the functioning of the planet, because we can help many, many more people. It's just that we've destroyed the biodiversity and everything else on that. So sorry, I went off track there a little bit off what you were going to say. But in terms of now close the doors. I want to start preaching now. No, but in terms of going back to the systems point, kind of what's the barriers? I go back to it. If we can make the business case, we're not going to change. We've got to be pragmatic about it. If we can make the business case, I think we can kind of get it. So we've seen evidence. Look at Vinted. I don't know if you guys have Vinted here in Australia, but it's essentially a resale platform for fashion. It's seeing explosive growth in Europe of just people just reselling their kind of clothing items. And you're now starting to see other kind of clothing brands offer this kind of, hey, if you're going to don't buy another item, do you want to resell your existing item? And I'll give you some kind of credit. And it keeps them in the ecosystem then. And you're starting to see like these brands trying to keep people within their ecosystem. So it's like kind of the start of that formation of circular economy. And that business model is incredibly high margin for those businesses, right? Your same material selling multiple times. And I've started to see some people trying to assetize those as well. So in other words, you could own a fractional share of that asset. You've seen it in collectibles and things like that. But again, can you imagine that? Like, I don't know, this could have been a shirt worn by, Leonardo DiCaprio or something like that, but I want that shirt, right? And then if you resell it on, I get a fraction or some sort of royalty payment. But I think we can unlock this through really smart business models and collective business models where there's a decentralized ownership thing there. So I think there's some great opportunities now with everything we have at our hands. And we've played with crypto for the last few years. So I think everyone's got over that hype of blockchain. So I think now's the time to kind of bring those kind of ideas together. And I'm incredibly excited and bullish, despite being pessimistic there a minute ago.
Edwina, I'd love to hear your opinion on this because we're talking about collaboration, competition. You're, of course, in a competitive market. Have you found that your competitors are taking inspiration from what you're doing? Have you seen this catching on?
I feel lucky, like I'm the farmer getting the last word. Certainly, there's been a great uptake on the capturing methane and making electricity, and it suits we're a medium-sized pig farm. It suits a medium to bigger style pig farm, and I think that's really exciting. If you let me, Julia, just make a comment on the last conversation. I mean, these clever people have very clever things to say, and the practical farmer in me says, just keep it practical. And I have a little example. We deal with quite a lot of big food companies that send us their food waste, and that's really great. Recently, we had a new product come across our path that had quite tricky packaging, so we can unpack products, and we have machines that can, and we try and separate cardboard and plastic so we can recycle it, and we do all these things, and we had a tricky packaging, we could make it work, and this really big company said, but we've got zero waste to landfill. So we would reduce a semi-load of waste down to a small bale of plastic, but that would still go to landfill. They're saying zero waste to landfill, and I'm going, I don't have anything else to do with it. And they said, we'll take it back. Like, you don't want to take this rubbish back. What are you and they're going to take it back to Sydney. And then I said, well, what are you going to do with it in Sydney? And they said, we're going to send it to Adelaide, where we're going to combust it and make electricity out of it. And so their zero waste to landfill is just causing such a bigger problem that I wish they'd just stayed practical and said, we'll do zero waste to landfill when we can. So don't dive too far into the end goal without having a practical path to get there would be my answer.
Can I just add to this? I'm working with a company which is now establishing an anaerobic digestion system in Victoria. So originally, we were looking at the process to treat the waste, looking at the circular economy. But then what we notice is that the value of electricity and value of the gas in Victoria is large enough that if you've got enough waste, big enough waste, that on its own can be profitable. So what happens is that the company is actually paying the chicken farmers for their waste to produce the methane, and then we putting the algae at the end of that to produce a spirulina, that we are selling that spirulina to Europe. So when you're looking at this is what happens, and that was one of the challenges that we had, that a farmer is not a specialist in doing some of these things. So who would be doing this? And going back to the previous discussion, who's going to do this part of the business and this part of the process? What we found is that we actually had to create two separate entities. One is dealing with the anaerobic digestion, one is dealing with algae, and these working together with the farmers to be able to sort the problem. It's not a problem to be able to establish this circular economy on site at the farm.
Edwina, sorry, just to ask you a question. Were you the person who was asking you to kind of new product line? Was that so? Your buyer was asking you to kind of create a new product line and asking you to invest into infrastructure to do that? Is that what you said?
No, I mean, we were already taking product from them. It
Okay.
was a new product line that had trickier packaging. And generally, we will have a different arrangement with every product that comes to us because it has a different nutritional value to our pigs. So some of them, we will pay them, some people pay us, depending on the product. So it fits somewhere in between that. But they had a packaged product line that they hadn't sent us any packaged material yet. We do a lot of packaged material. I mean, sometimes our place looks a bit like the tip because we have a lot of crushing of plastic and things like that. And we're reducing it massively. We used to recycle a lot more, but it's getting harder and harder to recycle it. And if we have, for example, in a dairy and juice products, if we have one Tetra Pak that's a wax milk cardboard container in amongst the other normal milk bottles, then it's not recyclable. And so that's hard. One of our challenges at our end is to try and reduce that amount that we're sending to landfill.
Yeah, so the point I was going to jump on was that what I've seen is I spent a very short time on farm myself, and when I was there, the supermarkets, again, this might be a UK thing, but like they would push down to the farmer of like, oh, we want cardboard, or we would like X, remove the plastic, or we would like you to focus on recycling and everything else like that. But again, the onus was on the farm to solve for that problem and move into this new field. And it was just like, it was always pushed down. And I go back to the kind of, I was fishing for that kind of answer, I suppose, but I just kept seeing that the infrastructure investment had to come from the farm, and no one else was kind of willing to just kind of support that, other than a slightly better offtake agreement, which locks them in even tighter into that kind of relationship. But then you just didn't see enough capital or finance interested in that kind of infrastructure. But it might be changing now. I don't know if you guys have seen anything different there, but generally, again, finance to that area was really, really poor. So I think that's a blocker.
We see the size of the waste would dictate
Right.
the finances. It depends on what you get out of that and the profitability of the process. That's dictate how well this works or not. I just want to add one other thing, and that is we're looking at a lot of things as a waste right now. To be honest, in the future, somebody's going to come to you and pay you for those. Because we are living in a planet that, as it was discussed, that we need to feed the people. The phosphorus is a limiting factor, and we've got plenty of phosphorus in the waste. So I believe that in the future, and this is a ready-to-use phosphate that we have, that we are underusing right now. So I think in the near future, this is going to be looked at as a very valuable resource. And hopefully this is going to be a very short time that we're going to see this.
I might jump back to something that you were saying, Edwina, which is around flexibility to create something that is more usable rather than drawing a hard line. And that seems to be one of the lessons that you've learned from your journey. I'd love to understand what are some of the other key watch-outs that you would want someone to know before trying to implement something like this?
Right, well, certainly that was my good example of it, the zero waste to landfill, and what an aspirational goal to have. But if you're doing it at the expense of something else, and I think that's, from the farmer's perspective, the bigger the company, they have big aspirational goals, and then that's very hard for their people to deliver on that. Hence why you end up in a tricky situation like this ended in. Other watch-outs, what we do is, you're talking about, is it being pushed back on the farmer? We're running a few different businesses, really, within our one business. We're selling pigs, but then we're also doing food waste destruction and recycling, but then feeds into the pigs, as well as selling power. So we've sort of got a lot of different levels going on. It's not easy. When we first started running our methane digester and making electricity, we had these generators that we were learning on, and they would alarm and tell us, wake us up, send us a text message to say they'd stopped, and if they stopped, the hot water stopped that heated our little piglets as well. So my husband, it was the same time we had little babies, and I promise you my husband never, he's here somewhere I think, would never hear a crying baby, but he would hear the text message to say the generator had stopped. And he would get up 2 times a night, like 4 times a week, until we got a handle on how to run it, and now we never get an alarm, or maybe they go to someone else, I don't know. But it's not easy. You've got to be committed, and you've got to want to do this, and you've got to work and work and work and work and work to make it happen and never give up.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear what it takes to implement something like this. Now, Huia, I'd love to actually ask you on Edwina's point of, these large organizations with these really aspirational goals. how should we be managing stakeholders in a system change like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think also to build on what Edwina's saying, I think that naturally, as humans, we want to take the complex and boil it down to something simple that we can work with. And there is logic in that, but we need to remember that system change takes looking and understanding the system as a whole. So in terms of the zero waste approach, and many have a zero waste goal, I'm often working with clients, and I'm currently working, with a big client in this space around, if your goal is zero waste, I can redesign a system so that everything stays out of landfill. However, what's that going to do to your carbon footprint? And they're like, oh, yeah, right. Okay, no, we didn't sort of factor that in. So actually, it comes back to me to really understanding that it's, once again, not about waste, and it's actually not just about resources. It's about inputs and outputs. So the circular economy includes carbon. It includes water. It includes lost time. It includes, vacant warehousing, underutilised warehouses or underutilised staff. It includes, resources really in the broadest way that you can possibly think about it. It includes thinking about how can we get the most value out of our logistics fleet. Often we have trucks going in or going out of any, for example, a remote community here in Western Australia, and often they are completely bare going one way. That's an underutilised resource there. How can we turn that around? How can we create value in that logistics system, for example? So it really is about thinking about resource flows, and your zero waste option might not be your best option in terms of then committing to your carbon goal. So, it's something that we need to be thinking in terms of the sustainability of the system rather than just being able to achieve one goal and tick it off. And certainly as we're entering, more of a rapid focus around greenwashing, the ACCC, we now is focused on greenwashing. We're seeing new regulatory approaches in the UK, specifically around certain terminology that you can't use because it is seen to be greenwashing. So we need to really be thinking at that system level rather than just trying to, solve one piece of the puzzle and tick it off. And that's a pain because it's harder, right? Be good to just do it all. If we could write a list and tick it off as we went, that'd be great. But it's actually a system of relationships, and that's where I come to your question about stakeholders. Sometimes the partner that you need is your neighbour, who you've never spoken to. Who's over the fence, for example. They have a manufacturing process, you have a manufacturing process, they have an output that could be one of your inputs, but you've never actually had the conversation around that. So often facilitation is really important around getting together potential stakeholders who might be a part of that wider system solution. And that's often what I'm doing a lot with my clients, is helping them to map out who might be your key stakeholders here. Who do you think when, and maybe it's a town hall, maybe it's it's an open workshop where, you come and do a bit of speed dating for your inputs or your outputs, I've got this and I'm looking for this. Here's a blue post-it, here's a green post-it. Here's what I need, here's what I've got. It's actually a really simple process and can be incredibly successful in terms of outcomes. So, the stakeholder piece is really critical.
Absolutely. Antony, it looks like you have something to say as well,
No.
but I'll just mention we will be taking questions in just a couple of minutes, so I'm not sure if there's a QR code that we can show, but I'll be moderating questions. If you do have anything that you'd like to ask the panel, please do use the code to That is a giant QR code. Wow. Please use this QR code to submit your questions, and we will ask those in just a second. Antony, coming to us from abroad, what have you seen over in the UK that you think we should be adopting in Australia, whether that's regulations or a mentality around this systems change?
Yeah, I wouldn't advocate for Brexit. That's one thing I wouldn't. But I think that's naturally going to be the trend, sadly, is we are deglobalizing. I think it's a trend that I don't think we can stop, personally. But I think that's a factor of a little bit of a lot of the dividends from globalization are kind of ending. But, and some materials are becoming less and less available because nature's in decline. Sorry to go on that again. But that is what's kind of creating some of these protectionist policies. In UK, so what's interesting in UK has come out of one of the positives, I would say, coming out of, so we say, leaving the EU, was the ability to reform the subsidy policy. And so, for example, farmers are now incentivized to earn their subsidy, for example, to then, for example, implement regenerative techniques, for example, or, improve their natural capital. So improve the kind of soils. So, and you're starting to kind of see, farmers actually able to transition and then provide a kind of nature-positive supply chain. So, I think Edwina I genuinely believe I came from the asset management industry, and the best asset managers in the world are farmers. They deal with so much more complexity. I had Bloomberg feeds, right? I had so much data feeds, and it's that's why I've kind of moved into this sector. It's this feels so obvious to enable these feeds. It's the greatest feeds we could enable to kind of understand all these risks that are kind of going on. But farmers are going to be, I genuinely believe, are going to be the best asset managers we can have. And so we've got to work out ways to incentivize them. And I think landowners, I don't know do you own your land, by the way, Edwina? Okay, you're in a good position, so you own land, that's good. Land is a good asset to have, but that's in decline. But I think there's a lot of tenant farmers out there, and I think you're seeing capital gonna go in towards land investment as governments are waking up or PE funds and large investors, that land is in decline and resources are in decline. So you're going to need really good stewards of the land, and those who can handle that complexity, can handle those, just dealing with that. And as far as I've seen around the world, that is in rapid decline. So again, if you're a business that is wanting to enable the circular economy or whatever it may be, I would seriously invest in kind of securing your best stewards of the land right now, because they're going to be the ones to truly enable the circular economy, I fundamentally believe. So yeah, I was just echoing the kind of points here that was kind of said about working together with your stakeholders in supply chain, but the number one for me is farming stewards of the land. They're the most important thing to invest into.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Now, we have quite a few questions that have come in. Thank you so much. We'll try and get through as many as we can. So what I'm going to ask our panel to do is I'm going to give you some rapid-fire questions. I'm hoping for 1 to 2 sentence answers so that we can get through as many of these as possible. Can the panel provide some examples of specific organizations in Australia or overseas that are standout exemplars of circularity?
Yes, but also I'll just caveat this by saying everyone's on a journey. So no, there's very few that are completely circular. The point is get on the journey. Apple are doing great work, McDonald's are doing great work. We've got our regional councils here doing some really interesting work. We've got startups in the form of fibre economy doing some incredible work here in Western Australia around recycling PPE and other fabrics. Incredible work coming out of Curtin and Murdoch. It's left, right and centre, really. Sorry, that's more than 2 sentences.
That's perfect. Next question is, what technologies have the potential to support circular food systems both now and in the future?
So there are a series of processes which is being developed. So what comes out of Murdoch is the outcome of last 15 years of research that we've done, which is now we set up a startup company on that. So we are moving very fast towards this circular economy and what's happening. And we shouldn't, I think, limit ourselves to what we've got in Australia. There is a lot of opportunities to bring technologies from overseas, and we're constantly doing that anyway. But yeah, I think that I can see a lot of potential path for our future when it comes to the circular economy.
Oh, can I just add? Can I add one? So
One sentence.
Oh, sorry, one sentence. One answer. Sorry. I was just going to say, IoT, I genuinely believe, is important for that. Like, if you do not know where things are, we can't, as you say, I've got this, I've got that. You can't connect that. So IoT is going to be number one. I generally think as a technology to kind of enable that.
Yeah, IoT, 100%.
Yeah. What is the role of the public sector versus the private sector to create communal solutions? Looking at you, Edwina.
I would be, very much in the private sector, and I think that's where the innovation is. So I would be leaving it there.
Any disagreement? Agreement?
I think we also need the support from the government on this and decision makers. I think I fully agree. I think this has to be established by the industry.
Maybe not to get in the way.
Yeah.
Not to have the regulation hold it back. And
I think it's both. It absolutely has to be both for many of the reasons that Edwina has raised. In the EU to good effect, bit of carrot, bit of stick. We need to be stopping certain ways of doing things and starting certain other ways of doing things. So it has to be both.
Maybe I missed the question, but I couldn't hear it properly. But I think there's a lot of fossil fuel subsidies, which make a lot of these things cheaper to just do linear economy, right? So you've got to remove a lot of that implicit subsidies in it, not just fossil fuels. There's a lot of implicit subsidies need to be removed. Remove those, we'll get the true cost accounting of things. You'll see also things. So I think government has a huge part in anything to play.
Absolutely. Professor, why is it that we don't capitalize on the sustainability of native foods in WA, farming, supply, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there is a lot of products that we can generate in Western Australia. There is also a path towards producing those in Western Australia, and we are more than happy to work with the industry to do so. So there is a lot of opportunities.
Fantastic. I have the countdown flashing at me on the screens now. I'm so sorry to all of the questions that we didn't get to. I'm sure our panel members will be around for the rest of today. They are, as you can tell, incredible experts in this space, and I do encourage you to have a chat with them if one of your questions wasn't answered. A huge thank you from me for all of the incredible insights and discussions that you've brought to this topic. It is a long journey that we are going to be on, but one that has both incredible opportunities and challenges. And I personally can't wait to see how quickly we can get there. Thank you all so much.